Good morning, South by. Good? It's good to see everybody. We are not long on time, so I'm going to jump right in. I'm so excited to have you three here as people experts, people who I get to come to talk about the many things that are going on in the world of work right now, intergenerational workforces, diversity, equity, inclusion, headlines, AI tech, automation, reskilling, public-facing, all the things that are going on in this world. So Kevin, what is top of mind for you in the world of people in 2025, and why is it the thing that's super poignant from your perspective?
Obviously around D&I, the subject's being very politicized, nationally and globally. So you'll see lots of organizations, a bit of a spectrum. You'll see some organizations who are more institutionalized, being a bit quieter, focusing on internal. You'll see some organizations, corporate, who are really committed to D&I, being a bit more vocal. But the one single issue I think is coming over the horizon is age. I think people are living longer, working longer. If anyone's read The 100-Year Life, people will have to retrain during their lifetimes. There's no such thing as a job for life. And I think the organizations that can embrace having 2 or 3 generations of people in their workforce will really, really reap the rewards. And I think some people who see that age as not part of D&I will find it a challenge in a couple of years' time.
David, what's top of mind for you?
Yeah, I think that certainly we can't ignore AI. I mean, it's going to have a profound impact on the way that we work, the work that we do. And as a consequence, that uncertainty creates a need for certainty, a need for stability. And increasingly, people are looking at their employer and their organisation for that stability. And issues of values, our purpose, what is the meaning of work to us, our status, is a very, very significant shift for us. So we're leaning very heavily into not just the impact of the technological changes, but also what do we do to create that culture and that stability for our people.
What do we do to create that culture of stability for our people?
I think for us, we've really had to think about the purpose of work. I think that when you look at workplaces and our attitudes to work 20, 30 years ago, leadership, stability were the things that we really wanted to get out of the workplace. Now, because of the nature of society becoming more fragmented, the values that your organisation has is really important, and we're seeing that not just with younger generations, but I think COVID has made us all take a bit of a step back and think about the values of who we work for. So what your organisation, what your company, what your leadership stand for is increasingly important to us all. The analogy 30, 40 years ago, working for a tobacco company may have been something that we'd have all kind of balked at. But now people are starting to ask those questions, and inclusion, your stance on the environment, your social footprint is so important now. So we're leaning very much into articulating our position on those things, and also making sure that people can see their values reflected in the work and the priorities of the organisation.
Amazing. David, what are your thoughts on AI? You brought up the topic.
Yeah, I think that certainly what we are seeing is the mundane tasks that take up your day, the things that you could spend doing better, more productive things, is becoming less of a feature of our work, and that is going to continue. So that's a really great thing. I also don't follow the sentiment that this is all doom and gloom. I think what makes us unique is our creativity. There is, yes, the potential for AI to replicate and to start thinking about kind of how it can lean in there. But ultimately, as humans, our creativity, our innovation is unrivaled. And I think what it will start to ask us is, what is the additional added value when we've removed those day-to-day tasks that take up all of our time? We're left then with the problem solving and the creativity. So those of us that want that space to be able to take a step back to think and to create and innovate, I think there's going to be a fantastic opportunity to do that. So we're really excited about those changes in the workforce, and it's really about trying to illustrate that, because it helps people feel more positive about that change. If someone says you're not going to be working through Excel spreadsheets for hours of the day, I think most of us would be pretty excited about that. It gives us the opportunity to really add some massive value.
Kevin, you have some thoughts here.
Yeah, I recently met a guy called Jeremy Peckham, who was one of the founders of AI, and he made the point that there's a lot of misinformation about it. So if you look at the most advanced program, ChatGPT-4, is only 30% accurate. So I think lots of the predictions are hearsay and people's individual opinions. So I think that people should look at AI in the lens of what they do. In D&I see it as a big opportunity. I think some of the more routine things we do, whether it be festivals or faith events that happen the same every year, it can make our life a lot easier. And at the other end of the scale, D&I is very much about judgment and nuance, the human side of advising our leaders especially. And that's something that AI can't do. So I see it as something really positive for D&I.
Let's talk about D&I since you brought it up. I hear the ambiguity of AI moving forward and the need for us to be really self-aware about how this technology will disrupt and enable across industries, across verticals, across sectors, and as leaders just being thoughtful about keeping people at the center of what we do. But there is this conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, the executive orders. Like, what comes next for this conversation on representation, Kevin? And is DE&I dead, as people would like to ask?
I think the classic conversation about just diversity has gone. Having an arbitrary number that represents, if you're an organization of 5,000, why should you exactly replicate a nation of 50 million? There's not really any logic. We need to be more nuanced and data-driven. So you should be looking at the national, local, and industry diversity if you're looking at diversity. But internally at the BBC, we have this slogan, diversity is not inclusion. So you need to be looking at your engagement and inclusion scores hand in hand with your diversity scores. I have a D&I scorecard with about 10 or 15 measures, and you need to be able to tell the story of where your organization is to be able to know where it's going to. So I think simplistic, sometimes tokenistic slogans aren't going to work. I think our people are a lot more informed, and that's a massive opportunity for us. If you can embrace the power and the passion and the knowledge of your people, then the organization can move forward immeasurably.
Amazing. David?
So for me, I think that most people will agree with the principles of equality and fairness. I think fairness is a term we don't use very often, but I think it should be reintroduced. And ultimately, most people will agree on the destination. What we disagree with is the tactics and the means of getting there. And I think that's where you've seen the fragmentation of views around this area. But, there are some fundamentals that are really important to us at Sky. So representation is important, but it's not a goal in itself. It's an indication of health. An organisation that is representative, we believe, is more healthy, and it also gives people confidence. But if you ask the simple question, does talent have a colour? Does talent have a gender? Does talent have a disability? People might say, no, of course it doesn't. But success does. So we spend a lot of our time explaining not just where we are, but understanding why our performance is the way it is. So the issue of culture and inclusion is something that we can measure quite effectively. And we spend a lot of time, the representation is a proxy to that, but ultimately it's the degree to which people feel included, they feel positive about their organisation. And for us as an innovative and creative business, the research shows if you don't feel included, and you'll all have had this experience, what do? You withhold ideas. You lose your vested interest in the success of your team and your company. And 37% of people withhold ideas. And for any organisation going into the future with all of these challenges, you cannot accept a third of your people withholding ideas because they don't feel engaged with you, your mission, or the experience of working for your organisation.
What is the challenge for leaders in breaking through this conversation in this moment? Because we see some folks who are struggling to really speak up on what it means to engage the people at work today.
I think for us, it's really important to articulate what DEI or inclusion means for your organisation. When you look out at the world, you can see most of it on fire at some way or form. So to be able to say, well, these are the values, these are our expectations, and we challenge some of the statements made, bring your whole self to work. It's often said without thinking it through. I don't bring my whole self to work because I get fired several times a day. It's a case of bring your best self to work, but the emphasis is on the word to work. And, these conversations that we're a family, not a team, your drunk uncle can ruin your barbecue. You put up with him because he's in your family. There has to be, I think, a bit of a reset of expectations, because if it runs without any guardrails around it, then you'll be leaning into some of the most challenging people issues and global political issues. And really the question is, well, what is the brakes for an employer?
Bring your professional self to work.
100%.
Right? I want to switch, because I'm watching the clock as well, to a conversation on the headlines. It feels like every day there is media across what a company should be. David, my question for you then is, are companies more political now than they've been before?
I would say that employees are more political. I think this expectation of what your employee stands for, the values, I think it's very easy to move into the area that your company has to reflect all of your values, but importantly, to reflect all of your opinions on every issue. And that is unrealistic. I think that part of the contract that you mentioned earlier is explaining. So for us, the issue of environmental sustainability is one that's linked to our business. We have the ability and the levers to affect really positive change. So therefore, it's important to us. George Floyd's murder sparked a huge amount of work that we're incredibly proud of. But we have to make that judgment call every single day, because, our employees, we want to be able to speak to our employees, and they're very vocal about asking us to comment on a range of issues, but we just have to make that judgment. The transparency of why we select some issues over others is really important, because what people look for is consistency. We can't satisfy every single employee in our business, because in some cases they may have diametrically opposed views on the same issue. So we have to be very conscious of that. So, it's a constant judgment for us, but we've made, I think, some really good decisions in the past, but we're very careful and considered in doing that.
Can I just give, on the flip side of that, my experience has always been in impartial organisations. So there are lots of institutions. I worked at the LTA, the FA, Brentford Football Club, and the BBC. And they're all, in their constitution, apolitical. They never have any political view. So D&I-wise, it's a godsend, because you can just go out and do the right thing, and you can say to people, we don't have a political view, we're not going to talk that because that's not what we do. And it enables almost pure D&I. And for me, that's been brilliant.
How do those organizations, and we have no time left, but how do those organizations maintain that apolitical view in this sort of moment where everything feels like it is give or take to some community or another? So
they usually have built into them almost a department and a team. There are the impartiality guidelines at the BBC. You have a public affairs department at the FA, where they check and challenge everything that goes out and everything that you do. So it's time and investment and commitment to ensure, it's almost like a filter of everything you do, and everyone in the organisation knows, we don't do that, we don't talk about that.
Okay, so we have done a 20-minute rundown of so many things that are going on, but what excites you about the work ahead for us in 2025, the impact of people on an organization and an organization on people? What are you most excited about? Kevin, we'll start with you.
People. So I think, as I said earlier, people within organizations, from my experience, are more educated around D&I than they've ever been. I will come across people who know more about a specific issue than I do, and I'm supposedly the expert. So I think if organizations can embrace that, so for example, empower your staff networks, allow them to live and deliver some of the projects, because it gives it a lot more authenticity. If you could embrace that power and that passion, your organisation will flourish.
David, what has you excited?
I think that it remains the same. So when you work for any large organisation or go to work, you are mixing with people who may not be within your broader circle of friends. The workplace is a really interesting dynamic. It brings people together from all walks of life, and the positive impact of rubbing shoulders with people who have a different experience is a wonderful way of growing, not professionally, but also personally. Most of the people that you work with, you think about the learning you've had, a conversation over a coffee, an interaction about a certain issue that's affected them. I think that the world of work, it's really underestimated the positive impact a really positive working environment can have on broader society, because you take what you've learned, you go to the table with your family, someone says something that is racist, sexist, homophobic, etc. And you have an answer based on your lived experience. And I think that is something that is really undervalued, and we should really value it more.
And then the opportunity for us as employers becomes, how do we facilitate that effectively at work to